as the fallout continues to be assessed from the destruction of what used to be called the state of Syria with the fall of Bashar al-Assad, the world continues to try and figure out what's going to happen next and what is the ramifications of all this. What is the meaning? And listen, there are all kinds of moving parts and shifting sands, and everybody's trying to find out, who's the winners, who's the losers, what may come next, etc. Lots of new information coming out. And in fact, yesterday, one of the I guess the first things that a lot of people are talking about is when it comes to who's the losers, it's been Iran and Russia are frequently cited, at least in the West, about how who lost the most, other than obviously Bashar al-Assad. But it's interesting when you take a look at the Russian situation. It's not as clear cut as it may seem. Of course, we love to say anything bad about Russia, but yesterday at a press conference, Vladimir Putin himself was asked about this, and here's what he had to say.
They want to present everything happening in Syria as some kind of Russia's defeat, Russia's failure. But I would like to assure you that this is not the case. And I'll tell you why. Because we've come to Syria 10 years ago to make sure that no terrorist enclave was established there, like we saw in some other countries, for example, in Afghanistan. So we have largely accomplished our mission. And even those factions that fought against Assad, they changed internally. It's not for nothing that these days many European countries and the United States, they want to establish ties with them. Well, if there are terrorist organizations, then why do you want to go in there? So it means they have changed, haven't they? So it means that largely you have accomplished our mission there.
Okay, well, I mean, you got to be honest, and that's kind of like trying to put lipstick on a pig. I mean, he's trying to say that our mission was largely accomplished back there. Yeah, I don't know that you can argue that. You can say that when they originally went in there, they went in to stabilize the Assad regime, and certainly when Russia first went in there, I think it was 2015, Assad was quite wobbly, and the Russian air power especially, and a lot of the, even to some extent the Kurds, but also the Hezbollah, was fighting in there. Some of the Iran-backed militias were fighting on the side of Assad, and combined with the Russian air power and some of the other things they did on the ground, definitely turned the tide at that time and created some stability by 2020, which held largely until things just literally disintegrated. But to say that your objectives were largely met when Assad fell is a pretty big stretch. But hey, that's I guess that's what people do these days. Try to make things good. I mean, you had some people try to say our withdrawal from Afghanistan was, we succeeded there. Well, we didn't succeed. I'd argue we should have been out of Afghanistan from 2009 forward, and so I was a big advocate of Biden getting out in 2021. But man, was it done horribly and executed terribly, both by the administration and the Pentagon, by the way. But so this situation here with Russia, they were successful for a while, but they wanted to, maintain the airbase they had in Syria. They wanted to maintain the warm water port in Tartus in Syria that they had. That remains to be seen what's going to happen with that. There's still some negotiation going on and decision-making in Russia if they even want to hang on to it. A lot of information is out there right now that Russia has been moving a lot of their assets into Libya. So it looks like they just kind of moved it from one part of the Middle East to another, at least to the North Africa area. So we'll see kind of how that plays out there. But one interesting thing he also did say, which does bear some analysis and some being honest on even on our side as well. He said, listen, you guys were in there originally saying that all, HTS and Al-Qaeda and ISIS and all of them are terrorist groups. But now all of a sudden the West is saying, yeah, but maybe we can get along with Jelani, the head of the HTS, the guy that was at least ramrodded up this military move that went from the Idlib province all the way down eventually into Damascus. And listen, there's some additional information that came out yesterday in the British information, that I think it's the Sun, came out saying, the Daily Mail, that says, hey, America helped prepare Syria's rebels weeks before they launched the coup that ended up toppling Assad. And of course, going all the way back to the Obama administration in 2011, we had our hand in all kinds of stuff about supporting one militant faction or another. all kinds of ammunition and weapons were going from the United States, and it wasn't even hidden that we were trying to topple Assad and conduct regime change, even though a lot of the words claimed we weren't. All of our actions said we were. And then kind of went dormant, and everybody's paying attention to everything else in the world except for Syria. But apparently, at least according to these reports, and they're being reported elsewhere, is that some faction of the United States was working with, I believe it's variously called the Free Syrian Army, that was composed of a lot of the former regime military personnel that were against, they were a legitimately rebel group because they were just trying to overthrow the government legitimately. Well, according to one of the, I think it was the second in command of that organization that was contacted by the British media, claimed that there were some American officials that were conducting liaison between HTS and this group here, presumably others. We don't know anything more about it at this point, how widespread it may have been, but allegedly American agents on the ground were coordinating with these people and telling them, hey, something's coming. And I think the quote was, you can get ready. You can either help in the fall of Assad and benefit from it, or you can stand on the side and get left behind, something to that effect. And so they said that information helped swell their ranks. Apparently it was quite small. 300, I think, is the number that they said. And that swelled up to 8,000 because of this information that the U.S. was helping them. And so we do have to ask, what is America's play in this? And what are we going to do? Well, if the interest and the desire was to get rid of the Bashar al-Assad regime, towards what end? Was it? What do we think is going to come now? Are we actually going to try and make relations with al-Jilani, who still has a $10 million bounty on his head by the United States, an avowed terrorist, one that has fought against the United States in the past? Are we actually going to work with this guy? And what do we think is going to happen to Syria? And Gary, if you could throw that map up of Syria, already it's just a complete hodgepodge. You see all these different colors inside of Syria. This is the map of the really, it's called the Syrian Civil War there, but it basically goes up until the time Assad fell, 8 December, I think, or when all that stuff started. And then you can see in the upper right-hand corner, that's that kind of olive color. That's where a lot of the Kurds are. That's where most of the U.S. military bases are. You see the dark green colors on the top, on the border there, broken up into two different spaces there. That's where the Turkish military has come in. There's also some Turkish militant groups and Turkish-backed groups that are operating in there. Now then in that center area, that light bluish area, which was the regime controlled, now is really not controlled by anyone. And then in the lower left-hand corner, you can see the dark blue area where just adjacent Israel, that's the Golan Heights. And now, of course, as we've been showing you recently, Israel has been seizing more territory. It's unclear yet how far they're going to go. They came to within 15 miles of the outskirts of Damascus. We don't know how much further they're going to go. What Netanyahu has been claiming that, well, as you know, we're just putting a buffer in there so that we can, defend ourselves. And then we also have reported that the Israeli military, the IDF, has basically just eviscerated the military capacity of what was the Assad regime militarily. They said they've taken out like 80% of all the air defense capacity it had. Arms depots, ammunition depots. Have been some fantastic explosions that were seen there, one not far from where one of the Russian air bases were. So it's a complete mix match. We actually agree with something that Colonel Doug McGregor said on our show a couple of days ago. I don't think that you'll ever see the country of Syria a whole again. I doubt very seriously whether the borders that existed at the time of the outbreak of the Syrian civil war in 2011, what was the borders of Syria, I don't think they'll ever be again under a solitary control of anyone. I can't imagine that the Turks are going to give up any of their territory, that the Israelis in the south are going to give up any of the territory that they've taken there. What's going to happen with the Kurds up in the northern part of there, the Kurds in Turkey, et cetera, all kinds of competing claims that are going on right now. And then, of course, as I argue, and this is only going to be something that's going to play out in the months and years to come, is what's going to happen with these HTS-led groups and all of the other militia groups that are part of this mosaic that now exists in Syria. Are they going to work together? Are they going to come into some sort of confederation? Are they going to agree to somebody, whether it's Jelani or someone else, to be the head of the state of Syria, et cetera. I mean, that just seems extremely unlikely. I think that more likely what we're going to see is a continued fragmentation of Syria and what was Syria, even among the HTS and all their different groups that are probably will end up infighting as they battle for control. I mean, you don't have, obviously, many times in Arabic history and throughout the Middle East, but one of the more recent ones was in Libya, when we facilitated the downfall of Muammar Gaddafi, and then all the groups started vying for power after that, and they're still vying to this day as there are two competing governments. They can't come together. And if that was, I think, in 2011 is when that took place, or maybe it was 2013. I can't recall right offhand. But whatever it was, it's been more than a decade, and that still hadn't been solved. So it seems pretty unlikely to me that Syria, which is even more fragmented, is going to find some way to come back into a unitary state. Now, given that foundation, then let's see what else is going on. Let's look at some of the component parts there. First of all, I want to look at the Jelani himself. So the guy that took over and the one that led the military drive from the Idlib province all the way down into Damascus, he's trying to recast himself as what was this classic Arab drab that he used to wear, all the headdress that a lot of the militants wear. He used to wear a lot of that stuff, kind of like Osama bin Laden, et cetera. Some of these guys, Baghdadi, a lot of them that wore that kind of stuff. Now he's kind of shed that. He's trimmed his beard. He's got a really, good haircut. Now he's wearing a suit. He's trying to look very, modern, very non-radical. That he's moderated himself, and that the West can trust me, because he's going to want to work with the West. He's going to want to get funds from the West and recognition from the West, because he needs that kind of validation in order to bring about whatever he wants to do. But now, everybody's having a significant wait and see attitude. You can be assured that people behind the scenes are trying to exploit him, to try and get him to do things that they want, probably offering him all kinds of deals. Counter deals. Others are trying to work against him, etc. It just doesn't seem like he is the, Osama bin Laden type charismatic figure, or even an al-Baghdadi or an al-Zarqawi in other groups in the past. And I suspect, again, history is any guide. If he's going to consolidate power, it's probably going to be done with power and ruthlessness. And if he doesn't do that, probably somebody else will stand up and do that until some form of new compulsion is imposed upon somebody. That's just unfortunately how history says. I would love to be proven wrong. It would be great for the people of Syria, which is what I care the most about, is that if they had some way to do this peacefully, that would be fantastic. Love to be proven wrong there, but that's going to be a long-term issue, I think, and we'll certainly be processing that as it goes on. Next, I want to look at the Kurds. Now, the Kurds are one of the more vulnerable groups out there, because they have relied on help from the United States, which we've given, but now then, of course, they're going quite a bit against the Turks. The Turks have been going against them for quite some time, but they've been held in check, really, by the United States. And then even there's been a lot of attempts for quite some time for the Kurds to work with the Assad government to try to come to some kind of accommodation, because they're going to have to live there for a long time. But now then the Kurds are saying, listen, I hope that Israel is going to help us out here, because they need the help. With, there's some competition, some cooperation between Israel and Turkey, and the one of the Israeli ministers was talking to a minister in Germany recently, and I think he went to Germany. I think he was a foreign minister, and he went there and said, hey, we're all for we feel like the international community has a responsibility to take care of the minorities in Syria, throughout all of this chaos here. And specifically mentioned the Kurds. And the Kurds are really hoping that Israel, according to that article I just showed you the headline of, they're saying, hey, we hope it's more with just words. We need it to be action as well, because we're afraid that Turkey's going to take advantage. And there's a lot of concern about that. And at this point, it's unknown what Turkey's interest is and what Turkey's capacity is. It's one thing to have those small enclaves knocked out on the Turkish border. I showed you on that map a minute ago, the dark green areas there at the top. That's one thing. And it takes a lot to maintain those because you have to, it's basically, it's a foreign occupation. So you have to keep it constantly outfitted with replacement of your troops. You have to rotate them through. Then, of course, you have to keep them fed every day and all of that. You have to have ammunition. You also have to have, just fuel, energy, electricity, et cetera. So it takes a lot to keep a foreign occupation base going like that. And if now then you have some idea that, hey, we want to get rid of all the Kurds. And I know that there's some in Turkey that do, but just in practical terms, that would be a really difficult thing to do. And how far into Syria, or what was Syria, how far will they go into that olive area that I showed you on the map a second ago? It's a long way, and it's quite spacious, and it would take a lot for Turkey to go in there and militarily conquer that. And then the question is, what are you going to do then? Are you going to annex it? Are you going to make that part of a greater Turkey, the recreation of the Ottoman Empire kind of thing? Or would you just do it as a raid to go and, attack and destroy Kurds and then go back to your area? It's unknown. The Kurds, though, are very much concerned about it because they're very reliant, and actually completely reliant on external help, as obviously it's a landlocked area and they don't have a state of their own per se. They just had an area within Syria, as it's been, all the time, even before the Syrian civil war. So they're kind of almost nomadic in the middle of all this sea of chaos. And you can understand why they would be concerned. And of course, the Trump administration coming in now is probably unclear what its intent is, what its desire is. There'll be a lot of discussions with Trump, probably, and Erdogan. And then we'll have to wait and see how that turns out too. But there's a lot of uncertainty there for a lot of people. And then you have the issue of our own troops in the area, which I'll actually talk about here in a second. Next, Israel is still not finished yet. So as I just mentioned there have been, as of a couple of days ago, up to 800 airstrikes launched by Israel to eviscerate the military capacity of whoever may rise in the ashes of Assad. That their military capacity is just utterly wiped out, and for all intents and purposes, as a force, basically destroyed. And it'll take many decades to rebuild a lot of that. But Israel's not through. They also overnight attacked a bunch of sites in Yemen against the Houthis again. And Netanyahu says Israel is continuing to use Houthis on behalf of the entire world. And listen, I get a little weary of hearing that kind of thing. You hear Zelensky all the time talking about how his fight against Russia is for all of Europe. And you have Netanyahu saying, and a lot of the Israeli leaders, we're doing this for the whole world. Everybody benefits from this. Just forget that kind of stuff. I mean, it's not fooling anybody. Nobody in any positions of power that recognizes anything. You're doing it for yourself. Just stop claiming this stuff about you're doing it for anybody else. Can you imagine that you're helping out the world by going after the Houthis, and the Houthis only went after you because of you went after the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip prior to the occupation, not the occupation, prior to the assault into the Gaza Strip following the 10/7 attacks in 2023. Only then, and I think it was a month after that the Houthis actually started engaging in solidarity with the Palestinian people. So that is exclusively tied to that because they weren't attacking Israel before that, and there was no issue with that at all. So they're not protecting the world. They're just going after themselves. I don't know why they need to say anything differently. They should just take care of it. But listen, the Houthis are a tough lot. And they're certainly a thorn in the side of Israel because if they still interdicting traffic in the Red Sea and things that are supposed to go into port with Israel, it's making life difficult for them. So they continue to try and attack the Houthis. And they've had some spectacular attacks which have been captured on video, et cetera, but they can't destroy the Houthis. And the Saudi Arabians tried for a decade to quell the Houthis, and they could never do it, even though they had all the air power advantages, air supremacy, because obviously the Houthis don't have an air force. And yet they continue to be a thorn in the side of them too. So Israel at some point is going to have to come to some sort of political accommodation with the Houthis, or this kind of stuff is going to continue on. But until that time, Israel will continue to try to say, no, we want to win everything militarily. And I imagine that's exactly what they're going to do. Then I want to shift the attention to the north a little bit. And if Russia was probably a loser overall, trying to put lipstick on a pig, Israel is the definite loser in all of this. It's happened so far. I mean, there's no question that you can make any argument that Israel is in a better position than they were before Assad fell, or that all these issues, because they have had this so-called axis of resistance for a long time, which was Iran at the top, and then they had Syria. They had Lebanese Hezbollah, they had the Hamas, they had the Houthis, a lot of these smaller groups, the militia groups in both Iraq and in Syria, informally allied to call what they call this big resistance. Well, that has just been almost destroyed, one piece after another, or badly defeated. They have definitely been defeated. It's probably too much to say that they've been destroyed, because Hamas and all of the Palestinian people still exist. And the hatred of Israel is even higher than it ever was before. But their military capacity to do something to the state of Israel is badly devastated. I mean, it's going to take multiple years to recover from that, even after all the violence and the war itself finally comes to an end. Same with Hezbollah. They suffered the complete, almost obliteration of their entire upper echelon leadership. That will be replaced. They suffered a lot of casualties in the southern part of Lebanon, but relatively small in compared to the numbers they had. That can also be reconstituted over time, and almost certainly they're probably already in the process of doing that as well. Now, Syria has been just taken off the chessboard itself, and so that's probably not going to help Iran for any time soon. That also interdicts a lot of their supply lines to the Hezbollah in Lebanon, so now then that's been interdicted. And so you see that Israel's collapse has just left Iran very high and dry and exposed. Now, that's not to say that they've been completely isolated, because they definitely haven't, owing to Russian support and Chinese support. So it's a plus and minus issue for Iran, but certainly militarily, it's been in a bad situation from what it was. So without question, they have been harmed. The question now, though, is what's going to come next. Now, you may remember there's been twice so far this year where Israel and Iran attacked each other back and forth. Israel destroyed an Iranian embassy in Syria, which caused Iran to respond and send a bunch of missiles into Israel for the first time in history. And then I think it was May of this year when that happened. And it was signaled before. Iran didn't want to go to a war, but they felt like they needed to respond. And there was, I think it was 300 missiles and drones that went in, all of which or most of which were shot down, not all of which. The United States, Jordan, France, I believe, and one other country all helped Israel interdict all of those things. And then, of course, Israel then makes an additional attack against Iran by assassinating a Hamas leader who was at the Iranian presidential inauguration in Tehran. And then in response on October 1st, Iran came back with another barrage of missiles, which again didn't, as far as we know, didn't actually kill anyone in Iran, but sent a message that in these cases, because it was a lot more ballistic missiles than it was drones, and a lot of them actually hit the target. None of them that we were able to see showed that they were interdicted. But in the aftermath of that, then there was many in Israel, many of the hardliners especially say, all right, we need to just get this deal solved. We need to go after and take out Iran. And there was nobody bigger cheerleader of that than former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, who in October said it, put it this way.
We have the ability to strike the nuclear facilities, to strike the regime itself. I would not waste this opportunity on just symbolic strikes or things that make noise, but actually hit the octopus on its head. I also want to point out something really important. The United States of America is at risk from the Islamic Republic of Iran. American citizens are at risk. Iran has been trying to murder Americans on America's soil for the past several years. And Iran that will have a nuclear weapon will be a threat to the United States of America with ballistic missiles. So this is not a war for Israel. This is a war for the free world. Israel is at the forefront. We are willing to do the job. We do need America to provide us a back.
Now, you see, that's where that again, that was back in October. This is not just for us. We're doing it for you. We're doing you a favor, and one wonders how much that message was meant for the American public or the Israeli public so much as it was for either, at that time, candidate Kamala Harris or candidate Donald Trump. Just says, hey, man, we need you guys to give us a back. We're doing it for you. We're taking it, basically, we'll do the dirty work on the ground. We just need your help to support this. But listen, we got to ask the question, and I really hope that Trump takes a hard, jaundiced look at this and doesn't just give any kind of emotional, reflexive, sure, whatever Israel says kind of thing, because we need to find out what is America's interest in this entire situation, not just the Middle East generally, but not even just Syria, but in regards to this whole issue with Iran. A few things need to be taken into consideration here. First of all, Iran has been shown to be very weak militarily. They have been a nuisance for a long time. They certainly have supported what we consider terrorist activity throughout the region, but it's been very muted. It's always been kind of on the back foot because it knows that if it ever goes too far, the power of the United States dwarfs anything they have, and so they have always been unwilling to take it too far. And it's been relatively short. And even when they were directly in your face provoked by the destruction of their embassy or had someone assassinated during a presidential inauguration in their own capital, et cetera, their reactions were very muted. And now that we've seen that, despite all these years of this so-called axis of resistance in the region, it turned out that it was just dismantled by Israel with our military support or with our ammunition and support. They were able to eviscerate this whole thing, proving that Iran is not some big mythical monster that is coming after it. See, Naftali Bennett there wants to make this case that they're this behemoth that, oh my gosh, we got to take them out now or they're going to come get us. And yet you see the wreckage all over the entire Middle East of how weak they are. Iran is not a threat to the United States. In fact, the only way that Iran can be a real problem for the U.S. is if we get stupider, and push them beyond a point to where they feel like their only hope of self-defense, the only way they can prevent themselves from being the next victim of a regime change war that they've now seen in many places throughout the Middle East, is to get a nuclear weapon. We have claimed that our primary objective has always been to prevent that. And yet the actions that we and Israel have taken continues to shove them headlong into a direction where the only thing they can do to defend themselves is to have a nuclear weapon. Now, if we want to prevent that outcome, all we have to do is stop shoving them in that direction. Give them any reason at all to think that they don't have to fear a regime change operation from us. And look, there's a myth out there that needs to be exposed here. There's a myth that says, like Naftali Bennett is the biggest cheerleader for, that if we just take out Iran and take out their leadership, Lindsey Graham has been one of the bigger American cheerleaders for this. Jack Keane has been another one. John Bolton, of course. All right, John Bolton's the biggest one. We ought to be honest there. Lindsey Graham is only second place in this regard. But these voices out there have long been talking about how we need to get rid of the regime and take out the regime, often very specifically and directly, thinking that somehow that's going to be better. It won't. It won't be better. And in fact, that's directly threatening the regime is, again, convincing them that the only way that they can remain in power is to have a nuclear weapon. And if you think that taking them out somehow is going to destroy the entire upper echelon of the regime, and that some magic formula beings are going to come rising up and that there's going to be a pro-America afterwards, it's just self-defeating delusion. It's not going to. It can just it's radically change the dynamics of the Middle East, get us sucked into a war. Again, Iran has withheld a lot of its capacity. It's still only used a portion of it against Israel. If it gets into an existential crisis where it feels like it's going to be the target of a regime change operation, then it no longer has a reason to withhold its weapons. That's turned out to be a fatal mistake for Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah. They had this really large rocket fleet and things that they had with their big arsenal that they never used. And his thought was always, well, we just have that, kind of in case, all things break loose. But he was led to believe right up until the day of his assassination that there was a political outcome, that Israel was willing to talk to him, and so he felt there was no need to go that far. Well, now he's dead. You have Saddam Hussein, who's dead. You have Muammar Gaddafi, who's dead. And then you have threats against Iran. So you can see that they will be tempted to think, I'm not going to be next on the hit list. And if things go in a certain direction, that they're going to take action that could turn this whole region on fire. And as bad as it is so far, as bad as it's been up to this point, it's been relatively controlled and contained. We need to make sure that we don't, ruin all of this, in many ways, luck that we've had to keep it from exploding so far, and think we can push just one more further up. And then, it'll be all them fall. And then the whole region will be happy and pro-American and pro-Israel, and peace will finally reign. That's the fantasy. If you keep going down this step, though, what you're likely to find is that you now set up another country that has nuclear weapons, like North Korea did. They came to that conclusion that the only way they could confirm their own safety was to develop nuclear weapons. And if you push Iran in that direction, now then you could be setting up a situation to where, and of course we all know Israel has nuclear weapons, where you could actually have a nuclear exchange. And then everything in the world that you think about security is upended, and all kinds of horrific things become possible then. We dare not find out where that number is. Our interests are to prevent anything from blowing up in the Middle East because of our domestic energy infrastructure and how much oil we're producing and all the kinds of other things that we can do with that. We are much less reliant on the Middle East for oil. That much of the world is, and so it's still a global commodity and it still matters. But our national security and our energy security can be, at the moment, self-contained. But to cause an explosion in the Middle East, where maybe the Straits of Hormuz are shut down, or all of a sudden a lot of oil is taken offline for various reasons, and God forbid if a nuclear exchange breaks out, because Israel is reported to have had around 200 nuclear weapons. I have no idea how accurate that is, but it's some sizable number. We know that for sure. But if Iran got one, and it was able to find its way onto its target, the Israeli state could be devastated beyond repair. It doesn't matter if they could fire another 200 and eliminate Iran after that. That wouldn't matter, because there would not be much left of Israel. They cannot get into a nuclear exchange. Listen to me point blank, be clear on this, it's crystal clear. Any use of nuclear weapons, any exchange, everyone will lose. Everyone who's involved will lose, whether that's Russia, U.S., China, Israel, Iran, U.S., Iran. Everyone will lose. There will be no winner. The only way to win is not to play. That's a fact. That is a fact. So we need to get control of these warmongering, war-lusting people who think that, yeah, look how successful Israel has been so far in taking out their enemies. We just need one more, like Naftali Bennett said. Avoid that alluring, it's like the siren call. Yeah, just one more, just go up. And then the whole place could be on fire. And the world as we know it will never be the same. And it won't be a better place for a very long time thereafter. Let's make sure we're clear on that. Listen, appreciate you guys being with us today as all this shifting sand continues to settle over the coming weeks and months. We'll be right here to tell you what's going on and give you the no kidding, the honest answer about what all these things mean and what's pro and con for the U.S. and our allies in the region and just what's happening there. You can count on Daniel Davis Deep Dive to keep doing that for you. And we will look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.